Thank you all very much for signing on to our second Brooklyn COVID Relief Fund webinar. I'm so grateful for all of you joining us again. As you know, Brooklyn Community Foundation has been working very hard to help its beleaguered county. I'm sure you've all been reading how hard hit Brooklyn has been. We are very much kind of ground zero for this crisis. And I think that what's important for all of us to think about, and is becoming very clear to us on a daily basis, is that those communities who struggle the most, whether because they are low income, because they are immigrants, because they are African Americans, that of course, like any crisis, this crisis hits our most vulnerable in the most extreme. And Brooklyn is in fact one of those areas where you really find some of the most vulnerable populations. And so as many of you already know, almost 4 weeks ago, I guess 3.5 weeks ago, we were one of the very first foundations to launch a COVID relief fund. It took 2 very hard days of the staff really getting its act together on how we could be most fair in getting money out to our most vulnerable neighbors, and how we could try to raise as much funding as possible to help Brooklyn. I have some very good news, which is that we have in fact raised $1.7 million. We are just beyond grateful and really proud of how Brooklyn has stepped up. Sadly, the need is so great that we really, and quite honestly, need to double that amount. I think one of the things we're seeing in terms of philanthropy is that while Brooklyn really has probably the most stunning impacts of this crisis, our ability to raise money is more limited given the vulnerability and given how many low-income communities in Brooklyn there are. I'm not convinced that some of the really big philanthropy across the river is really going to meet some of our, deeply community embedded groups in East Flatbush, in East New York, in Coney Island. So that is one thing we're really grappling with as a foundation, is how can we step up as this borough's community foundation and raise as much money as possible, because I think that we're it. But I am very grateful, and I want to say to anybody who's on this webinar right now, thank you so much, truly from the bottom of our hearts, for supporting this cause. And we're still at it. We are still trying to raise money. And I want to do a big shout out also to my program team at BCF, who has been getting money out by design every single week. So every single week applications come in asking, we're now talking about hundreds of applications, and every week this program team reviews those applications and we get money out by the end of the week. So we are well oiled in the moment of a crisis, and I'm really grateful for everybody on my team who's been working so hard. So today, as some of you may know, in 2016, shortly after that particular election, we launched an immigrant rights fund. And we've always done a big focus on immigrants. For those of you who don't know, almost 40% of Brooklyn's population is foreign born. There are, by some estimates, as many as 200,000 undocumented immigrants in this, actually the 9th largest county for undocumented immigrants in the country. And so when we launched the Immigrant Rights Fund, we started raising money, and we started getting money right out to those who were suffering the most under the federal administration's really draconian policies, all of which you know about. And we're very proud of our work around the Immigrant Rights Fund. And once again, we find ourselves in the face of this crisis having such a huge impact on our immigrant communities here in Brooklyn. So we've always done a lot to focus on undocumented immigrants. And we are so really delighted to be able to take Lorena away from her incredibly busy work in Sunset Park and have her join my program officers. So I would love to welcome Lorena Kourousias and Sabrina Hargrave on my team, and they're going to speak a bit about the impact of this crisis on Brooklyn's very large undocumented population here in the borough. Thank you.
Thanks, Cecilia. My name is Sabrina Hargrave, and I'm one of the 2 program officers here at BCF. Right now, we are all hands on deck for the COVID-19 Response Fund, but I typically also work on the Immigrant Rights Fund that Cecilia just spoke about. And as a Latin American immigrant myself and almost lifelong Brooklynite, I'm just so honored to work at a foundation that really funds organizations that are and nonprofits that work towards racial equity, ones that are led by the very community members of those affected communities, and those that really center the voices of those directly impacted in the work that they do. So this type of approach and the way that we do work directly fed into how we're doing our response fund for COVID-19. And through that fund, we're working to fund organizations that are working to address the anti-Asian xenophobia that really rose up, particularly at the beginning of what was happening. And also support organizations that are working with some of our most vulnerable populations, such as older adults, low-income workers, and families, to provide critical services and support such as food, mental health support, and things such as benefits case management, make sure that they're well taken care of at this time. We are in our first wave of responses, which are general operating support grants of up to $10,000. And as Cecilia mentioned, we've been getting money at the door weekly and have distributed almost $400,000 to date, with more notifications going out tomorrow. So every Monday, our wonderful communications team updates our website. So brooklyncommunityfoundation.org, under the COVID-19 tab, you can see kind of the new organizations as they're rolling into our fund, and so more will be notified tomorrow. And in terms of just the craziness in the world right now, thank you for taking time out to be with us. Literally, you're in my home right now. So welcome into my home. And this crisis is hitting home for all of us, but we understand that it is acutely hitting immigrants across our borough. As Cecilia mentioned, almost 40% and counting of Brooklyn is immigrant. And there are lots of existing disparities that makes this crisis worse, right? So as we know and understand, and Lorena will be speaking a little bit more in her expert voice, undocumented immigrants in particular will be left out of many of the structural responses, particularly those at the federal level. As you may have heard, undocumented immigrants cannot receive any of the, or even mixed status households will be unable to receive federal dollars. And Lorena, I see you nodding, so I'm gonna let you speak about the specifics of that. I definitely don't wanna take away your expert voice in that. But I just wanted to highlight, before we dive into our conversation, a few organizations that have been funded response fund that are working with immigrant communities closely, and under that focus for our fund. So the Chinese American Planning Council, an amazing organization, is working on education and advocacy to address the anti-Asian harassment going on throughout the borough. We are also supporting organizations such as Undocumented, that is doing Spanish language reporting on the specific impact of COVID-19 on immigrants and undocumented immigrants. They're also working through WhatsApp as a platform to combat misinformation as to what is going on the ground. And another organization that we are supporting on local is working with undocumented workers through remote benefit screenings and webinars, helping with technical assistance to restaurant groups to help employees. And Mixteca, Lorena is the executive director, will be speaking about their work, but you know, they came to us with the application to provide some financial relief, specifically to Indigenous immigrant families in Sunset Park, and prioritizing those who recently lost their jobs as housekeepers, nannies, and restaurant workers. So welcome, and thank you for taking this time with us today, Lorena. I would love to ask you, you know, just if you can provide everyone on the webinar a little bit of a quick overview of the work that you are doing at this time.
Absolutely. First of all, thank you so much for having me here and for have the voice of our community represented in those webinars. And I just wanted to say, just to start, that it's been amazing working with the foundation, that the application was amazing. I couldn't believe it. I completed. When I completed, I was like, this must be the letter of interest. It was amazing. And it really speaks a lot of how mindful you are and how you put the money into the communities, that sometimes we have no the same access that other communities, other mainstream organizations, that we are grassroots organization with lack of some resources sometimes. But Mixteca has been around for 20 years. We are based in Sunset Park, as you say, Sabrina, and we are 100% immigrant woman-led organization in Sunset Park, which I'm so proud of being part and being leading that organization. And we provide services on health, mental health, immigration, and education. All those services are for undocumented, most of them undocumented immigrant communities, low-income communities. And we have to adapt a little or a lot with all the services. And right now, we are providing food for our community members. We are delivering meals, cooked meals at night for our communities twice a week. And we have one fund relief to provide some money because economic hardship is really, really hard for our community. So I know we're going to be talking a little more from some specific changes that we've been doing. So that's Mixteca. Mixteca is the second home for many immigrants in Sunset Park and from all around the city. It's like we are based in Sunset Park, but we provide services to people from the Bronx, from Queens, from Staten Island, that they don't have another organization like Mixteca to go and receive services.
Thank you. I know many community members consider you all a second home, so thank you for the work that you're doing at this time and always. And just giving us a little bit of understanding, what changes or adaptations have you had to make for the work that Mixteca provides at this time, and kind of what challenges are arising due to this shift?
It's been really hard to be working with the community that is heavily impacted. And I will say, according to the statistic, is one of the most impacted communities with the COVID-19. And we were expecting this impact in our communities. It's like these disparities on health have been all the time there. And we are really concerned for the well-being of the people of color, not just for the Latinx community, but all the people of color are being twice as likely impacted as white people. So the changes that we have to make are all the services that Mixteca provides are now provided online. So we have ballet classes for children because we know staying at home is good or is easier for some communities than for others. And we know for many of our community members, having access to a computer is difficult. We know they are using their phones to have access to all the online classes, but we have the classes online. ESL classes are online. We have yoga classes also online. We figure out that our community needs different spaces to heal from what is happening right now, because this crisis triggers other trauma that our community has been facing. And we are providing information on COVID-19 and preventing measurements, and everything is tailored to our community, but we are also offering an alternative services to heal, like the ones I mentioned, ballet, yoga. We do some workshops on Know Your Rights, and we are working also with the census, and we provide all the health updates for our community for them to be informed in what is happening. And we have another like Know Your Rights workshops because our community has been target for fraud. So many people are calling them and asking for their information, and it's fraudulent activity. And so we are there to provide all those services on top of the COVID-19 services. But the most important part is Mixteca is taking the services online to keep the connection with our community. As Latinos, we need the connection. We need the physical connection. We need the other person there. We need to know that there are another community that cares for them. And that's why it's super important that the foundation, the Brooklyn Community Foundation is having this money available for us to provide that relief. Because those 10,000 can be a lot of money and can be nothing. If we try to pay rent, that is one of the struggles for our community, is going to be almost nothing for them. But what we are trying to say right now is here we are, and you are not alone, and we're going to do all that is on our capacity to provide some support, some comfort, some relief for what is happening to you. So as I mentioned before, we are providing meals, cooked meals, with the support of a local restaurant. Takombi is providing us cooked meals twice a week. So on Thursday and Saturdays, 100 families are having tacos for dinner, which I think is really important because there is this group helping us with that. And we are also providing other services, all the information we can provide. And we are doing this fundraising to give cash to our families, because we're going to talk a little more about the concerns our community has. But those are the main services that we are providing. We are actively in social media all the time. It's like we are answering phone, we are providing counseling services over the phones, we are doing crisis intervention through Facebook, because we know our community is in Facebook. If you try to work with the Latin community and you are not in Facebook, it's like you don't exist.
And in terms of like all of the different information going on, we understand that undocumented immigrants right now are facing an unparalleled threat from the federal administration, right? At the same time as COVID-19 is happening here in our homes and local hospitals, ICE was on the ground in Brooklyn even after we had the shelter-in-place orders from the mayor, the governor, and the president. I know that, or we know as a community that many members are afraid to go to the hospital if they're sick because of public charge, and we know that even this week, the Supreme Court is going to hear and potentially cancel the DACA program, where many frontline workers in our hospitals are DACA recipients. So under this incredibly stressful backdrop, what are some of the concerns that you are having for the community that you work with as this pandemic continues?
It's really hard. So we have from some community members dying, community leaders dying. So this pandemic is hitting people of color the hardest. We know that. We know our community are desperate for food, desperate for financial support to pay the rent. And they are really afraid to go get some of the services that may be available, few of them, because as you mentioned, the public charge is in the back of their minds, because we know that the system is putting a lot of barriers for them to access the services. And we know there are many food hubs to go and grab food. But I'm always wondering why our community has to put themselves in a risk going out 3 times a day or 1 time a day, every day, to go and pick up the food when other people can just get the delivery at their homes. And it's like this is systemic. Is the way that we try to address these issues are usually put our community in more risky situation. It's like I think we can do better. So our families have lack of access to government stimulus program, as you mentioned. They are, and I'm really upset of that, because it's like, I feel like you are penalized if you marry the person who has IT number and you pay your taxes jointly. So you, with your social security number, you won't get the relief either. So if this is not a punishment against the immigrant community and a systemic oppression, what can we call this one? So they have not access to any of the reliefs. Of course, they have not unemployment because they cannot apply for unemployment. They cannot apply for any other relief, the rent, and any other. So our community is left out of all these package. Putting ourselves, like the community, the service providers, in a high pressure because we have to do a lot of things here. We have community members that they tested positive with the virus and they have other members in their house and they are the ones providing the money for this family, and now there is no one providing money and they cannot go out to get the food. So we have community members that they have to choose between feeding their family or paying for the funeral for people that their loved ones they lost. We have people that are struggling so hard because they have another health conditions, like are survivors of cancer. They are another health compromise and they can't just go out and get the food or get some support. So they are lacking to their houses. And this is being like a really heavy and challenging. And I can't thank the foundation enough for this money that is going to put a Visa gift card in the mail of these people, and they can use it the way they want it, because I think it's also important to empower them and to give some freedom on the money and not being conditioning the money like, okay, you have food, but this type of food, the food I want you to have. Is this Visa gift card, is they're going to be using it for whatever they need or they feel is more needed for their family. So yeah, it's been really, really hard.
Yeah, thank you, Lorena. I mean, like, right now we're talking about, or the community you represent is, vast. And, when you think about the multiplier of all of the immigrant communities that exist in Brooklyn that are facing these challenges, the same exact challenges at the time, and not only of the local economic impacts, we think we're Brooklyn Community Foundation works so locally, but how much of our global economy depends on remittances and depends on, the labor and the work of our Brooklyn community members at this time. So the effects are definitely going to be felt worldwide. And I know, just want to be mindful and respectful of all of those joining. Thank you for your time. And I was hoping in the last minute or two, Lorena, that you can please offer us some examples and advice on how we can be good neighbors to our undocumented neighbors at this time. So what can we do as individuals to help support them?
This is also a moment of opportunity, an opportunity to act in different way, an opportunity to show solidarity and respect for our community members, for our neighbors. So I think there are different ways to be better neighbors. If you have access to resources, to financial resources, there are many foundations getting those funds to support the community. If you can thank the person, and I'm thinking like a really quick example, you get your groceries delivered to your apartment. If you are able to do that, tip well the person that is delivering. It's usually a member of our community that is putting themselves in a risk because they have no other choices. It's like they have to go out and work to to put food on their table. So it's on us to share the resources we have, whether they are financial, and also understanding, because inform ourselves about the challenges our immigrant community is facing is important. And I think that is another way to be better neighbors, like understanding that it's not as easy for them than for us. And we know the privilege are invisible for the person who has it, but there are many things that are not as easy as just go and get it. It's not as easy as that. So being better neighbors is sharing your resources, being mindful of the people that are out there, and informing yourself about what can you do and what is the challenge for these people. And there are many things that I think that are out of the table right now. I didn't know the time is going to go that quick. But anyway, I want to also
thank you
all of the time.
No, thank you. We have a few questions that I think we can jointly answer along with Cecilia's help. And I just want to make people, those joining, aware of who the other organizations are and how you can find out more information. So I would say, I mean, my guess is that all of the organizations that have been supported via the COVID-19 fund do support undocumented immigrants, whether or not they state so explicitly in their mission and their work, just as a function of the wonderful organizations that we partner with, and also who is Brooklyn and, you know, who makes up Brooklyn. And I would encourage you all who are looking to understand what other organizations are working in this space to take a look at our website, brooklyncommunityfoundation.org. All of our organizations that have been funded through the COVID-19 Response Fund are listed under the grants portion of that, and it is updated every Monday from our communications team, and there's going to be a lot added on Monday, so please keep looking back for that update. Let's see. And then I would just give me 1 second as I read. So there's 2 questions. One I think that I can answer, and one thing that I'm going to give to the group that's on video. But in terms of finding resources for students at this time, again, I would encourage anyone to just look at the organizations that we are partnering with that would probably have those materials. We at the foundation do not create those materials ourselves, but the organizations we fund do. Lorena, do you guys have any resources that teachers might be able to use in helping support their students at this time? And also, are there any mourning customs that people should maybe be aware of as community members are lost?
Yeah, we do have some resources, and to be mindful on the time, we have a list in our page which is all the resources about COVID-19, and we divide it on education, mental health, and I think that's the easiest way to get into that. And we are updating that list because everything is rapidly changing. So we update that list, and if people can get to that list and get all the resources that we are using, in particular for our community. And yeah, that's what we have.
I was muted. Thank you. And I know that there's questions about how our funding will continue, and I can kind of say what my response is as a program officer, and then if Cecilia has anything to add as the president and CEO, please join me after. But this is just the first wave of our response. So as Cecilia said earlier, we launched March 13th. So most people were not even, the shelter in place order, I don't even think was announced while we were working on it and releasing it, or was the same day. I don't know, it was a very intense time period. And, you know, so we had to get things up and running before, you know, as things are developing. And as such, this is our first wave of response, and we are actively raising money for additional waves of support that are upcoming. So I'm going to step back and let Cecilia maybe add a little bit more to that. Just understanding that in this first wave, it really was helping organizations pivot to their response to support community members at this time versus more internal support.
Thanks, Sabrina, and thank you so much, Lorena. It was really moving to hear what you had to say, and your community is lucky to have you as an advocate. So Sabrina is exactly right, which is, you know, we launched this on March 13th, much earlier than actually many others, and I think that's right, earlier even than the shelter in order. And we realized that groups on the ground needed emergency money. This is emergency. We're calling it immediate response. This is about food. This is about cash to low-wage workers. This is about anti-Asian hate crimes. These are things that are direct response to this growing pandemic. And so this is essentially emergency funding, and we are still getting those requests weekly. And Sabrina is one of a team who are reviewing those requests weekly. So this is what we were calling our emergency response or our immediate response. However, the reality is, of course, that so many of these community groups will still be responding to this crisis, but in different ways. And we certainly know that the economic toll after this immediate health toll is going to be enormous. And many of our nonprofits themselves, their very sustainability is on the line. But in addition, how they can help their community members survive economically. So we actually, our plan is that after this immediate response phase, we don't know when that's ending, but we understand that it will at some point pivot, as Sabrina said. We'll move into what we're calling a sustained response. We hope if we can raise the funds that those grants will be larger, because we really want to be here for the long term. So I really want to be clear that this is not a community foundation that said, oh no, Brooklyn's in trouble for the next 2 months. No, these community groups, and Lorena, I know you could back me up on this. This is a very long-term issue. And I think that the economic justice issues are going to be really, really staggering. So we may pivot both in terms of size of grants, timing of grants, and the catalytic need from them. But I don't see this immediate response phase anytime sooner. I know you've all been reading about Brooklyn. The crisis on the ground is very real. I also just want to say one thing that Lorena said that I thought was so important about solidarity and about neighborliness. And I think that as a community foundation representing a very specific geographic area, and also a community foundation with a very specific lens, one that is looking at equity, one that's looking at racial justice, we really are here in solidarity. And we are trying to do the best we can to really put the community in our name, Brooklyn Community Foundation, and to really stand by our communities.
Thanks, Cecilia. I'm going to quickly rattle off what I hope are some quick answers to. I know that there are lots of questions and we're sorry, and can follow up in more depth after this webinar. But I just wanted to mention that the program team, in addition to reviewing grant applications, is also doing significant work in partnership with other foundations. So there's a few other COVID-19 response funds, and they've taken a lot of lessons from us in terms of, like Lorena said earlier, like our application, we try to keep as short and sweet as possible. So we are trying to partner and refer and build that collective impact of philanthropy as much as we can. And our VP of programs and partnerships is the key person doing this work. And in terms of just some creative ways that some of the organizations are supporting undocumented immigrants at this time, it is this pivoting to keeping the social connectivity and services and support in a remote format, which, given some people's just like cultural practices and just norms, may be difficult to do, but, establishing these new norms, I think, is something that organizations are doing. And with respect to those working around housing in particular, I'm trying to remember which notifications are out versus what I've been reading, but I do think that Local New York has been is one of our fund grantees that has been doing a lot of advocacy around housing, and then there will be a few others announced. And in terms of just the overall work and who we partner with on our, I guess what is typical or normal anymore, but on our other portfolios do housing advocacy. And if anyone wants to reach out privately, shargrave@bcfny.org, and we can definitely give you a list of more organizations. And I think that's all my quick rattling. I'll leave it to Cecilia to give the final goodbye, but I just wanted to say thank you so much for joining us, Lorena. I just stalked you all week to make sure that you can join us. Thank you for being patient with me and for your expertise and everything you're doing for our community this time. Really appreciate it.
Lorena, is there anything you would just like to say about Mixteca, about your community, just briefly?
Of course, yeah, just like I'm representing here a big community that has a lot to say and a lot to offer, that our community has been the pilot and really working hard for this city to be functioning, and we still looking at them like they are invisible, like people dying and we don't know how many. And there are many people in our community dying in their houses because they have no diagnosis, they haven't been diagnosed. And I don't want to close with that idea. I want to say that it's super important what you are doing, because putting the money into these communities that otherwise are invisible it means a lot, and it means a switch in the narrative about our communities. It's putting the money where the needs are, and it's super important. And of course, we have another grant from you, and I think I love you too much, and I know my opinion is maybe not really objective, but the other grant that we got is for healing. Healing is important, and it's going to be, after this crisis, we're going to need a lot of healing as community, and as Latinos, we know how to heal in community as well. And I invite everyone to be in community, because this is the moment to be together. And thank you for being there for our community. And we are here. Sabrina, thank you for all those emails.
Thank you, Lorena.
Forget even the day of the week. I don't know, but thank you. Thank you.
And thank you all so much for joining us. Again, we are trying to do the best we can for Brooklyn. If you know anybody who you feel can support this COVID response fund, I am asking you please to reach out to them and to help us. We are truly doing the best we can, and we are grateful for any and all help you can give us. Thank you so much.